Did you know, even before foreign conquerors set foot on our shores, our ancestors already had a thriving and organized community? It was called a barangay. This word comes from balangay, a type of large boat that the first Filipinos used for their journeys. Each barangay was a free community, like a small country. It was led by a datu who served as the leader in war, judge in disputes, and protector of his people. In larger and wealthier communities, there were also rajas and sultans, leaders with broader power and influence. Our ancestors were not just farmers and fishermen, they were also skilled traders. The Philippines, because of its strategic location, became a center of trade in Southeast Asia. We already had connections with traders from China, Japan, India, and even with kingdoms in what are now Indonesia and Malaysia. They exchanged our products like gold, pearls, honey, and exotic woods for their porcelain, silk, and iron. The proof of this is the artifacts unearthed in various parts of the country. This kind of trade enriched not only our economy, but also our culture. Society back then was divided into three main classes. At the very top were the maharlika, or the ruling class. This included the family of the datu, raja, or sultan. They owned large tracts of land and had the most influence in the community. Next to them were the timawa, or the free people. They were not slaves and had the right to own their own property. They were warriors, traders, or ordinary citizens who served the datu. They made up the largest part of a barangay's population. At the lowest level of society were the alipin or oripin, but their situation was not like the slavery we know in the West. There were two types of alipin, the aliping namamahay and the aliping sagwigulid. The aliping namamahay had their own house and family and only served their master for certain periods. Meanwhile, the aliping sagwigulid lived in their master's house and served every day. A person could become a slave due to debt, as punishment for a crime, or because they were captured in war. However, it was also possible for them to gain their freedom. The peaceful life of our ancestors changed with the arrival of Ferdinand Magellan in 1521. Although his expedition did not immediately succeed in conquering the archipelago, it marked the beginning of Spain's interest in the Philippines. More than 4 decades later, in 1565, Miguel López de Legazpi arrived. He established the first permanent Spanish settlement in Cebu, and soon after he conquered Manila in 1571. From there, the Spanish gradually expanded their power to different parts of Luzon and Visayas, using the strategy of divide and conquer, or pitting Filipinos against each other. One of the biggest changes brought by the Spanish was the Christian religion, specifically Catholicism. The friar missionaries became partners with the soldiers in the conquest. They used the cross along with the sword to persuade the natives to abandon their old beliefs. They built churches, which were usually in the center of the newly established pueblo or town. Filipinos who embraced Christianity were given new names derived from saints. The former barangays were consolidated under the administration of the church and the colonial government. However, not all Filipinos bowed to the conquerors. During more than 300 years of Spanish rule, over 100 revolts erupted in different parts of the archipelago. Among the most famous was the revolt of Francisco Dagohoy in Bohol, which is said to be the longest in Philippine history, lasting 85 years. There was also the uprising of Diego Silang and his wife Gabriela Silang in Ilocos, who fought against unjust taxation. These rebellions, although most failed, showed the burning desire of Filipinos to regain their freedom. The system of governance also changed significantly. The former datus and nobles lost their true power. They were made cabeza de barangay, tax collectors for the Spanish. At a higher level, gobernadorcillos were appointed. The highest official in the colony was the governor-general, who directly represented the King of Spain. Systems like the encomienda were also implemented, where lands and the natives living on them were entrusted to a Spaniard. In practice, this became a means of forced labor and abuse of Filipinos. By the 19th century, a new type of Filipino emerged, the Ilustrados. These were educated Filipinos, mostly in Europe, who became aware of liberal ideas of freedom and equality. They didn't immediately push for separation from Spain. Instead, their initial goal was to achieve reform or change in governance. They established the propaganda movement in Spain. Their demands were simple: media group, old document or manifesto from the propaganda movement, historic Spanish government documents mentioning the Philippines at its stock, at it distribute _ equally, for the Philippines to become a province of Spain. to have representation in the Cortes or Spanish Parliament, and for Filipinos and Spaniards to have equal rights. The three most famous propagandists were José Rizal, Marcelo H. del Pilar, and Graciano López Lleida. They used their writing talents to expose the abuses of the friars and the colonial government. Rizal, through his novels Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, awakened the feelings of Filipinos. Del Pilar, as editor of the newspaper La Solidaridad, fearlessly criticized the wrongdoings. López Lleida, a skilled orator, used his voice to make the grievances of the people heard. Their works were secretly brought into the Philippines and ignited the spirit of nationalism. However, the propaganda movement failed to achieve the requested reforms. The Spanish government turned a deaf ear to their pleas. This failure, along with the arrest and exile of Rizal to Dapitan in 1892, convinced many Filipinos that peaceful means were no longer enough. Radical action was needed. Because of this, an ordinary Filipino from Tondo, Andres Bonifacio, decided that a different path should be taken. He believed that freedom could only be achieved through armed struggle. On the night of July 7, 1892, in a house in Azcaraga, now Recto Avenue, Andres Bonifacio, along with Teodoro Plata, Ladislao Diwa, and others, secretly founded the Kataas Tasang, Kagalang Galanggang Katipunan ang Mga Anak ang Bayan, or more commonly known as the Katipunan. This was a revolutionary organization with the goal of overthrowing the Spanish and establishing an independent Philippines. Its members underwent a blood compact ritual, where they signed their names with their own blood. The Katipunan quickly spread to different parts of the country, preparing for a widespread revolution. The secret of the Katipunan was revealed on August 1896, which pushed Bonifacio and his companions to start the revolution. They gathered in Pugadlawan, or Balintawak, and there they simultaneously tore up their cedulas, the symbol of slavery to the Spanish. Their cry, "Long live the Philippines! Long live the Katipunan!" This signaled the outbreak of the Philippine Revolution. Battles followed in various provinces around Manila. Although lacking in weapons and skills, the courage and love for country of the Katipuneros became their weapon. As the revolution spread, a name emerged as a brilliant military leader in Cavite, Emilio Aguinaldo. His consecutive victories in battles brought him great fame. This led to conflict within the Katipunan itself, which was divided into two factions, the Magdiwang, who favored Bonifacio, and the Magdalo, who favored Aguinaldo. To resolve the issue, the Tejeros Convention was held on March 1897. Here it was agreed to establish a new revolutionary government. Aguinaldo was elected president, while Bonifacio was only elected Director of the Interior. The outcome of this was a tragedy, the arrest and killing of Bonifacio, the father of the Katipunan. Despite the internal conflicts, the fight continued. The war temporarily ceased due to the Pact of Biak na Bato, where Aguinaldo went into exile in Hong Kong. But with the arrival of the Americans and the outbreak of the Spanish-American War, Aguinaldo saw an opportunity. He returned to the Philippines, and with the help of the Americans, continued the revolution. The Filipinos quickly forced the remaining Spanish forces to surrender. On June 12, 1898, in Cavite, Emilio Aguinaldo declared the independence of the Philippines. The Philippine flag was unfurled for the first time, and the Marcha Filipina Magdalo, now our national anthem, was played. The Declaration of Independence was followed by the formation of a Congress in Malolos, Bulacan. Their primary task was to draft a constitution for the new nation. The Malolos Constitution paved the way for the establishment of the First Philippine Republic on January 23, 1899, with Emilio Aguinaldo as its first president. This was the first republic in all of Asia, a tremendous victory for a nation that shed blood and lives for freedom. Although this republic did not last long due to a new war against the Americans, its birth remains an important symbol of the Filipino people's ability and determination to govern themselves.